My wife left me because I couldn't have children, but years later she came back. With a child. She left me the same day I found out I could never have children. I still remember the sterile hum of the hospital lights, the way they flickered slightly above the doctor's head when he said the words that gutted me from the inside out. Your chances are extremely low. Near zero. He said it clinically, as if he were diagnosing a cracked pipe. As if my entire future hadn't just been erased in the span of a sentence. Sarah sat beside me, stiff, her hands folded perfectly in her lap. She didn't reach for me. She didn't say a word. Just stared straight ahead like the wall behind the doctor held all the answers. I turned to her, already bracing for the conversation we needed to have. What we could do next, how we'd figure it out, because love was bigger than blood, right? But she was gone. Not physically. Not yet. But I saw it in her eyes. Something had turned off. We left in silence. She didn't ask how I was feeling. I didn't offer. The car ride home was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that scraped the inside of your skull, like something waiting to explode. I kept telling myself it was shock, that she just needed time to process. We'd been together for 8 years, married for 5. She had to love me more than the idea of a baby, didn't she? 3 days later, I came home from work to find the closet half empty and her ring on the counter. No note, no goodbye, just a single text, sent hours earlier. I'm sorry, David. I can't do this. That was it. No explanation. No attempt to fight for us. I stared at that screen like it might change if I blinked enough times. But it didn't. And when the numbness wore off, what was left behind was something so raw I couldn't breathe through it. I didn't eat for 2 days. Didn't sleep for 3. I sat on the edge of my bed and replayed every moment of the last few months. Every look she gave me that felt distant. Every time she turned away when I tried to touch her. Every excuse not to talk, to stay late at work, to sleep facing the wall. I hadn't lost her in that doctor's office. I'd been losing her for a long time. I just didn't see it. Or maybe I didn't want to. After she left, I threw myself into work. It was the only thing that made sense. My startup, a struggling tech platform I'd poured everything into, became my only pulse. I slept at the office, showered at the gym, ate like a college student with a hangover. My friends stopped calling after a while. I didn't blame them. I'd become a ghost with a calendar. Efficient, robotic, completely unreachable. But the work paid off. 2 years after Sarah walked out, we got acquired by a major firm. The deal closed on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I signed the papers with shaking hands and walked out of the boardroom with a bank account I never dreamed I'd see. 7 figures. Clean. No strings. I should have felt something. Instead, I bought a bottle of champagne and drank it alone on the floor of my new apartment, staring at the ceiling while the city pulsed outside my window. No celebration. No noise. Just the quiet hum of success in a room that still echoed. That's the thing no one tells you about getting everything you wanted after losing everything you loved. It doesn't hit the same. It was almost 3 years to the day since she left when I got the message. Unknown number. Just one line. David, please. Can we talk? I stared at the screen like it might burst into flames. I hadn't heard her name in over a year. Hadn't seen her face since she walked out of our lives like she was stepping out of a room too stuffy to breathe in. I didn't respond. The next day, another message. I know you have every reason to ignore me, but this isn't about us. It's about him. Him? The third message came with a photo. A little boy, no older than 3, with dark eyes and a jawline that hit me like a freight train. His hair curled the exact way mine did when I was his age. I dropped the phone. My pulse spiked so fast I thought I might pass out. It couldn't be, could it? My hands were shaking when I picked the phone back up. She'd sent one more line beneath the photo. His name is Eli, and he needs you. And just like that, the past came crashing back through my front door. Because the woman who left me for being broken now stood at my doorstep with a child that looked exactly like me, and a secret that could destroy everything I'd rebuilt. And I hadn't even heard the half of it yet. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at the edge of the bed, holding my phone, staring at that photo of Eli like it was a bomb counting down. Every few minutes, I zoomed in on his face. His eyes, the slope of his nose, that half smirk like he was about to say something sarcastic. It was all me. There was no denying it. And yet how? We hadn't touched since the diagnosis. I hadn't even considered freezing samples. I was broken. She'd said it herself. And yet, There he was. Real. Alive. And if her message was true, mine. But the line that really stuck with me wasn't "he's yours." It was "he needs you." I finally answered her the next morning. "Meet me. 1 hour. The old cafe. You come alone." She replied immediately, like she'd been sitting there, waiting, phone in hand. I got there first. I always did. It was a little diner we used to haunt back in the lean years. The kind of place with peeling menus and burnt coffee. The last time we were here, she was laughing at my terrible impression of her mother. That memory hit like a kick to the chest. Then she walked in. She hadn't changed much, maybe a little thinner, hair pulled back tighter, lines under her eyes deeper than I remembered. But the look was the same. Calm. Composed. Like the world owed her grace. She slid into the booth like she still belonged in my life. I didn't say a word. She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, and turned it to me. There he was. Eli. On a swing, laughing. In a hospital bed, smiling through 4 tubes. In a car seat, watching cartoons. In every frame mine. Ours. And then she said it. "He has leukemia." The words echoed in the space between us like a gunshot. I leaned back slowly, my throat tightening. "You waited 3 years to tell me I have a son, and now you want what? A donation? A savior?" She winced. "I didn't plan this. I didn't even know if it would work. But after we separated, I couldn't let go. I still had one of your samples from the fertility clinic. You signed a release once, remember?" I blinked. "I signed it so we could try, Sarah. Together. Not so you could play Frankenstein with my DNA." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't trust them. I'd seen her cry before. She was good at it. "You have every right to hate me," she whispered. "But Eli doesn't. He's innocent. And he's dying." The word hit harder than anything else had. "He needs a match. You're his best chance." I stared out the window, gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. My heart was racing, but it wasn't anger. It wasn't even grief. It was something deeper. Something colder. "You used me, Sarah. I know. You walked away the second I couldn't give you a child, and now you come back with one that is mine, but you made him alone." "I didn't want to trap you." "No," I said, voice flat. "You didn't want me. You wanted a version of me who could give you what you wanted without the pain. You left the real one behind." She didn't argue, didn't flinch, just sat there, letting it land. Then she slid a folder across the table. "Here's everything. Test results. Legal paperwork. Proof." I didn't touch it. She stood up slowly, shoulders shaking. "I'll give you space. I had no right to come back. But David, if you can help him, even just to test, please." And with that, she walked away again. This time, though, she left something behind. Not just a folder. A name. A face. A life I didn't ask for. But one I suddenly couldn't stop thinking about. That night, I sat on my balcony, folder unopened, phone off, whiskey warm in my hand. I should have been furious. I should have called a lawyer. But all I could picture was that little boy's face. What if he really was mine? What if I was his only shot? What if I said no? And what if that killed him? I didn't hear the knock at first. It was soft. Hesitant. Then it came again. 3 times. I opened the door and froze. A little boy stood there. Brown eyes. Soft curls. Holding a stuffed dinosaur in one hand. Behind him, Sarah. "He begged to see you," she said, voice cracking. "I told him he had a superhero in the city. He thinks you're Iron Man." He looked up at me, blinking. "You're my dad." And just like that, the world split in 2. He stood in my doorway like a question I hadn't prepared for. Small shoulders. Curious eyes. Tiny sneakers with one lace untied. That stuffed dinosaur, green, frayed, clearly loved to death, was tucked under his arm like it held his whole world together. And then, softly, without even blinking, "You're my dad." It wasn't a demand. It wasn't even a doubt. It was a statement wrapped in hope. Sarah hovered behind him, her lips pressed tight, like she wasn't sure if she should speak or run. I could have shut the door. I could have said nothing. But instead, I dropped to one knee and met his eyes. "What's your name?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Eli," he said with a grin. Like the quarterback. My throat tightened. I had no idea how to talk to a child. No training, no instinct. But I knew how to listen. And I could feel, deep, primitive, undeniable, that he felt like mine. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled drawing. 2 stick figures. One tall, one small. Both had wild brown hair and capes. "That's you," he pointed. "And that's me." He had already drawn me into his life, and I hadn't even said yes yet. Sarah didn't stay. She said it was better that way. Claimed she didn't want to influence the moment, that Eli had been asking to meet me for weeks, that he deserved to choose for himself. But I could see the cracks in her mask, the way her hands shook when she handed over his overnight bag, the way she looked at me like she was both begging for forgiveness and daring me to walk away. Once the door clicked shut behind her, it was just the two of us. Silence hung heavy for a second. Then Eli broke it with a simple, "Wanna play?" I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but we played. We built towers out of books and knocked them over with dinosaur roars. He showed me how he gave names to clouds. We ate cereal on the floor and watched some cartoon I didn't understand. I let him win. Every game. Every time. And somewhere between the second juice box and the third episode, he curled up beside me on the couch and whispered, "This is the best day ever." He didn't know the weight of those words, but I did. After he fell asleep, I sat in the dark, staring at the folder Sarah left. I finally opened it. Every page was a punch to the chest. DNA results, 99. 7% paternal match. Diagnosis, acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Stage, early. Treatment, aggressive. Prognosis, unknown. I read it twice. Then a third time. It didn't get easier. Then I found the note she hadn't meant me to read. Folded in the back, handwritten. Torn at the edges. If he asks where his father was, tell him the truth. Tell him I ran first. The next morning, I took him to the park. Not the fancy kind, the little one tucked behind a row of shops, with rusted swings and graffiti on the slide. He didn't care. He laughed like the sky was made just for him. And I watched him, hands in pockets, trying to memorize the way he moved, the way he lit up. He didn't know anything about betrayal or loss or complicated medical charts. He just wanted to climb. And then I noticed something. A man, watching us, dressed too well for a park, sunglasses too polished, standing just a little too still. I shifted, instincts flaring. He didn't have a kid with him, didn't have a dog, didn't even have a phone out. Just stared. I scooped Eli into my arms, heart pounding. "Time to go, buddy." 5 more minutes. Rain check. The man didn't follow, but he didn't leave either. That night, I confronted Sarah. "What's going on?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" There was someone watching us. A man. Clean cut. 30C. Too still. She paled. "I thought they wouldn't. I mean, they said they'd stay back." "Who, Sarah?" She hesitated. Looked down. And then, the clinic. The one where I conceived Eli. My blood ran cold. They've been asking questions. About the legality of the sample use. About parental rights. There's a complication. My voice dropped. "What kind of complication?" She met my eyes. "They think you didn't consent." I stared at her, heart sinking. "Did I?" She looked away. "You did. Once. Years ago. But the paperwork's murky. And now that you're, well, rich, visible, they're worried." I let out a slow breath. "And you didn't think to mention this before?" I didn't think it mattered. Until now. The dots connected fast. They weren't here for her. They were here for me. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there was preparing to make a claim. On Eli. I stood in Eli's room that night, watching him sleep, wondering how much longer I had before someone tried to take him away from both of us. Because the world didn't care about DNA. It cared about signatures, rights, laws, leverage. And suddenly, this wasn't just about blood. It was about the fight I never asked for, and a boy I now couldn't live without. Thick paper. Heavy envelope. No return address. I almost didn't open it. Something about the weight felt final, like whatever was inside couldn't be undone once I saw it. But curiosity always outruns fear. Inside, a formal notice. Notification of potential legal conflict regarding parental rights. It was from the fertility clinic. Sanitized language wrapped around one brutal truth. Based on current records, the original donor consent may be insufficient for establishing full parental rights. We advise all involved parties to seek legal counsel immediately. I read it 3 times, and each time the words hit harder. Insufficient. Not invalid. Not absent. Just muddy. Ambiguous enough for someone to use it against me. My stomach dropped. Because if someone wanted to take Eli, a judge could actually listen. I called Sarah. She didn't pick up. So I called again. And again. The 4th time, she answered with a whisper. "I didn't want this," she said, voice shaking. "I swear. You forged my future into existence, Sarah. I said, steady but sharp. You built a child from a signature I don't even remember giving. I was desperate. And now you've made him vulnerable. There was a long pause. Then, I've been contacted by a lawyer. They want a hearing. I felt something snap inside me. A hearing for what? She was crying now. Not the kind of cry that seeks sympathy. The kind that comes from realizing you've unleashed something you can't take back. They're arguing, you're not the legal father. That I acted without full consent. They want custody settled. I stood frozen in my apartment, staring at the city like it might offer answers. They? Who the hell is they? The clinic. Their board. Their legal team. They want to control the narrative. Protect themselves from liability. But if this escalates, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. If this escalated, Eli could become a ward of the system. Or worse, someone could claim he was no one's. I didn't sleep that night. I sat beside Eli's bed, watching his chest rise and fall. The way he clutched that same fraying dinosaur. The little sigh he let out in the middle of a dream. I didn't need a judge to tell me who I was. I was the man who held him when he threw up after chemo. The man who watched his cartoons and learned his favorite bedtime stories. The one who showed up when no one else did. He didn't know the words parental rights. He only knew what dad felt like. The next morning, I walked into my lawyer's office. Not corporate. Not flashy. Old school. The kind of guy who wore sweaters and glasses he'd had since the 90s. He looked through the file quietly, nodded once, then said, "We can fight this." But, he leaned back. "But you need to decide. Are you ready to go public with this? Because once this hits court, it's not just between you and Sarah. Your name's on that business. You've got investors, press, a whole image." I stared at him. "You think I care about image? I think you need to be ready. Because if they come for custody, this gets ugly. And fast." I nodded. "Then let's make it uglier." Sarah and I met with the lawyer that evening. We sat on opposite sides of a glass table like adversaries. Like co-conspirators forced to face the fallout of their own design. "I didn't want to lose him," she said softly. "Then you should have stayed." She blinked hard. "I was scared. You were selfish." The lawyer raised his hand. "We don't need to litigate the past. We need to prepare for what's coming." He laid out the plan. A countersuit. Claiming intent. Establishing emotional bonds. Documenting my role in Eli's life. Requesting emergency parental guardianship pending full legal review. We had a shot. Not a guarantee, but a shot. "Do you want to sign?" he asked me. And I did. With shaking hands and a pen that felt like a weapon, I signed the paper that would make me legally what I already was emotionally. His father. But before I left, I had one more question. What happens if they win? The lawyer didn't blink. "Then you'll be listed as a donor, not a dad, and they can decide where he goes next." My jaw clenched. Over my dead body. The next morning, I got a call. Blocked number. The voice on the other end was male. Smooth. Polished. "Mr. Sullivan, we'd like to offer you an agreement." I didn't respond. "In exchange for dropping your legal challenge, we'll arrange a private settlement. Generous compensation. A full NDA. No headlines. No hearings." I laughed once. "You're trying to buy my silence. We're trying to protect a child from a drawn-out legal nightmare." I looked over at Eli, sitting on the floor, coloring outside the lines like he didn't have a care in the world. "No," I said. "You're trying to erase me." A pause. Then the voice hardened. "Be careful, Mr. Sullivan. Courts don't always side with biology, especially when the original consent is disputable." I didn't hang up. I just whispered one sentence. "You don't get to threaten a man who has nothing left to lose." And then I ended the call. Because the war had started. And I was all in. The courtroom wasn't what I expected. No grand windows. No echoing gavel. Just fluorescent lights, gray carpet, and a judge who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. But for me, that room might as well have been an operating table. Because they weren't just debating paperwork. They were cutting me open in front of strangers, trying to carve me out of my own son's life. The plaintiff sat across the aisle. 3 suits, all from the clinic's legal team. Corporate wolves in silk ties. They didn't look at me. I was a complication, not a man. A variable they failed to control. Sarah sat beside me. She wore black. Understated. Her hands twisted a tissue until it disintegrated in her lap. I didn't speak to her. Couldn't. Not after everything. But I could feel her guilt pulsing like heat. My lawyer leaned in. "They're going to argue that you signed over any parental rights when you agreed to be a donor. that you never intended to be involved. That's not true. Intent doesn't matter. Paperwork does. I clenched my jaw so tight my molars ached. Then the judge walked in, and it began. The clinic's lead attorney stood up first. Smooth. Controlled. A smile that said, "This is just business. Your Honor, Mr. Sullivan signed a release years ago, acknowledging that his genetic material could be used anonymously. Ms. Monroe acted without proper notification. Therefore, while Mr. Sullivan is genetically linked to the child, he has no legal standing as a parent." He paused for effect. To be clear, we are not questioning Mr. Sullivan's character, only his legal status. I wanted to laugh, or stand, or scream, but I didn't, because Eli was sitting in the hallway outside, coloring, oblivious, pure. He didn't need to hear them talk about him like he was a product. My turn came next. My lawyer stood, calm, sharp, methodical. "We will provide evidence that Mr. Sullivan has been a present, active father, that Ms. Monroe intended him to be involved, that the so-called donor agreement was never designed for this context." He looked the judge straight in the eye. "And more importantly, we will present the one thing that matters most, the child's well-being. And the child knows him as Dad." It was a good opening, but I could already feel the war behind their smiles. This wasn't about Eli. Not really. It was about precedent, liability, power, and I had just enough money to be dangerous. The next hour was a blur. Sarah took the stand. She admitted it. Everything. That she'd used the sample after we separated. That she hadn't told me until recently. That she made a mistake. "I thought I could handle it," she said, voice cracking. "But when Eli got sick, I knew I couldn't do this without David. Not because of genetics, but because he's the only person who ever made this feel real." They asked her if she loved me. She said, "Not enough." That one landed harder than anything else all day. Then it was my turn. I stood up, adjusted my tie, walked to the witness stand, and looked out at a room full of strangers who were about to decide whether I was a man or a statistic. They asked me why I came forward. I told them the truth. Because I looked into my son's eyes. And he knew me. They asked me if I signed a waiver. I said maybe. Years ago, when I thought we'd do this together. I never agreed to be erased. They asked me what Eli meant to me. I said, everything. And then, because the judge allowed it, I showed them something. A crayon drawing. 2 stick figures. One with a tie, one with a cape, both holding hands. "That's me," I said, my voice trembling. "That's who I am to him. Not a donor. Not a name on a spreadsheet. His father." The judge didn't rule that day. He said he'd need time to review the case. But as we left the courtroom, I saw the clinic's lawyers whispering. Frustrated. Shaken. We'd rattled them. I stepped into the hallway, exhausted. Eli ran up and threw his arms around my leg. "Can we get ice cream?" My throat tightened. "Anything you want, buddy." And as I carried him down the steps of that courthouse, I realized something. I wasn't fighting for rights. I was fighting for him. And someone, somewhere, didn't like that. Because that night, a package showed up at my door. Unmarked. Heavy. Inside, photos. Surveillance shots. Of me. Eli. Sarah. And a note. "He's not safe with you. Walk away, or we escalate." My hands went cold. Because this wasn't just legal anymore. This was personal. The photos were taken from across the street. One showed me tying Eli's shoes outside the cafe. Another, us walking through the park, my hand on his shoulder. The third hit the hardest. Eli asleep in the back seat of my car, head slumped to the side, mouth slightly open. Someone had followed us, watched us, documented our every move. And the note, typed in block letters on unbranded paper, made the message painfully clear. "He's not safe with you. Walk away, or we escalate." My pulse slowed instead of spiking. That's the thing about true fear. It doesn't come with a scream. It comes with stillness. The kind that sinks into your bones. I read the note 3 times, then lit it on fire over the sink and watched the ash dissolve like it never existed. But the pictures, those I kept. Evidence. Just in case. I didn't tell Sarah. Not yet. She was already spinning from the court case, barely sleeping, barely functioning. And honestly, I didn't know if I could trust her. Not after what she'd done. Not after how easily she'd rewritten our history to suit her fear. I called my lawyer instead. He didn't waste time with sympathy. "Do you recognize the sender?" "No." "Anyone who'd want to sabotage your custody?" "Pick a direction. I'll start an investigation." Quietly, I said, "I don't want this in the courtroom." Not yet. He hesitated. If this goes south, it won't. I hung up. Because this wasn't about strategy anymore. It wasn't about laws or contracts or technicalities. Someone had crossed a line, and I was done playing defense. I moved us to a hotel that night, under a different name. Eli thought it was an adventure, a new room, a rooftop pool, unlimited cartoons. He called it the Daddy Vacation. I forced a smile every time he said it. But inside, I was unraveling. I didn't sleep. I sat up in the armchair, scanning the windows, checking the hallway every 30 minutes, running worst-case scenarios like a broken film reel. What if they tried to take him? What if this wasn't just about legal custody? What if someone, somewhere, decided that the cleanest solution was the one no court could reverse? 2 days passed. Then 3. No more letters. No more photos. Just silence. Too much silence. On the 4th night, I noticed a car parked across from the hotel. Black. Windows tinted. Engine running even though no one got out. It was still there in the morning. By noon, it was gone. By nightfall, a new car, silver this time, took its place. Not subtle. Not sloppy. Deliberate. I called my lawyer again. They're watching, I said. But they want me to know they're watching. He paused. Then they want you afraid. I'm past afraid. You want protection? I want names. The next morning, I confronted Sarah. I showed her the photos. I watched the color drain from her face. Oh my God, she whispered, her hand covering her mouth. Is this about the case? You tell me. I don't know anything, David. I swear. I haven't spoken to the clinic since last week. I believed her. Mostly. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of something unsaid. What aren't you telling me? She looked down. I've been seeing someone. That hit harder than I expected. Who? An investor. Someone who supported the clinic. We went on a few dates. Nothing serious. I stepped back, hands in my pockets to keep from shaking. You think it's him? I don't know. You gave him access. She blinked. I didn't think. Exactly. That night, I pulled every favor I had left. Private security, background checks, digital sweeps. I had the money now, the reach, the will. What I didn't have was time. Because the next photo that arrived wasn't of me. It was of Eli. At school. Taken from behind the chain-link fence, his backpack sliding off one shoulder. No note this time. Just a name written in black ink across the bottom of the picture. Eli Sullivan. They knew his name, his routine, his vulnerability. And they weren't asking me to walk away anymore. They were daring me to fight back. I had cameras on every hallway, locks on every window, and eyes on every angle. But none of it mattered. Because while I was preparing for a threat to kick down the door, I missed the one already sitting on my couch. It happened on a Tuesday. Eli was watching cartoons in the hotel room, wrapped in a blanket with his dinosaur tucked under one arm, a juice box in the other. He didn't even look up when the knock came. 3 soft taps. Too gentle to be a threat. Too casual to be room service. I checked the peephole. Nothing. Opened the door. No one. Just a flash drive. Unlabeled. Small. Cold in my hand. I plugged it into my laptop. 1 file. No name. Just a video. I hit play. The screen stayed black for a few seconds, then flickered into a surveillance feed. Not security cam footage, something more precise. Clean. Trained. The angle showed me in the cafe 2 weeks ago. With Eli. Then it cut to the hospital. Him sitting on the bed. Me handing him a juice box. Sarah beside us. Then again, the courtroom. Wide shot from the back. Then, our hotel hallway. Frame by frame. Moment by moment. Every second of our lives tracked, stored, sorted. At the end of the video, a single line in white text. You're not the only one building a case. I didn't panic. I planned. There's a specific kind of calm that comes when you know the stakes can't get any higher. It's not bravery. It's surrender to consequence. I called my lawyer. They're escalating, I said. He sighed. How bad? They have footage from inside the hospital. There was silence on the other end. That means access, he said. Internal. Exactly. We were looking for a monster in the woods, but the threat was in the walls. That night, Sarah came to the hotel. I didn't tell her about the video. Not yet. I watched her as she sat at the edge of the bed, brushing Eli's hair off his forehead while he slept. She looked like a mother. Soft. Tired. Real. But I didn't trust my eyes anymore. You said you dated someone from the clinic, I said quietly. She nodded. Briefly. Name? Graham Neely. I froze. That name meant nothing to most people, but I remembered it. One of the original investors in the clinic. Quiet, deep pockets, dangerous reputation. He was interested in legacy, she continued. That's how he phrased it. Always talked about genetics like they were currency. And you told him about Eli? I mentioned I had a child, but not mine. She hesitated. I might have hinted. I stepped back. You hinted to a man obsessed with legacy that your child might be the product of a billionaire's DNA? Tears welled up. I didn't know what he'd do. I never meant. You gave him an idea, and now we're the experiment. She tried to reach for my hand. I pulled away. This isn't about us anymore, I said. This is war. That night, I watched Eli sleep. He twitched, smiling in his dreams. Probably flying through space with dinosaurs or riding a dragon made of candy. His innocence was a shield he didn't even know he had. But innocence doesn't stop bullets. And it doesn't win custody battles with men who see children as proof of ownership. I opened my laptop, started pulling every file I had. Birth records, emails, hospital visits, school forms. Anything that proved I'd been there. Every day, every scraped knee, every story time, every fevered night. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one. 2 days later, I walked into the law office with a flash drive in my pocket and a new name on my side. Graham Neely, the man behind the curtain, the ghost in the video, the investor who saw a child as a crown jewel. Proof that he could fund not just life, but legacy. And I had the leverage now. My lawyer loaded the footage onto the screen in the conference room. Your Honor, he said, the opposing party has not just violated privacy laws. They have weaponized surveillance to influence a custody battle. This is no longer a question of who can raise Eli, but who should. The judge watched the footage in silence, frame by frame, then looked at me. Are you saying your child is in danger? I didn't blink. I'm saying someone thinks they can own him. And in that moment, everything shifted. Not just the case, but the weight of truth. Because when power meets proof, something cracks. And sometimes someone falls. That night, as I put Eli to bed, he whispered, Daddy, are we winning? And I didn't know how to answer. Because right then, in that quiet room, I realized something terrifying. We weren't the only ones fighting for him anymore. The courthouse smelled like old paper and nerves. Fluorescent lights buzzed above us like flies circling a body. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be hunted while standing still. This wasn't just a custody hearing anymore. It was a battlefield. And the child they were fighting over wasn't just a little boy. He was a prize. Proof of science. Evidence of power. A child born not of love, but of legal ambiguity and convenient biology. And if I lost today, I wouldn't just be losing a son. I'd be handing him over to the people who saw him as a product. Graham Neely sat 2 rows behind the clinic's legal team. Impeccable suit. Polished shoes. A watch more expensive than most houses. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. Power doesn't flinch. It waits. Sarah sat beside me, stiff, pale. She hadn't spoken since I told her about the surveillance. About how her investor had turned our son into leverage. When she tried to apologize, I didn't stop her. But I didn't forgive her either. This wasn't about forgiveness. It was about keeping Eli safe. At any cost. My lawyer began. Calm. Precise. This isn't about legality anymore, he said. It's about safety. Morality. Reality. He laid out the timeline. The DNA. The abandonment. The return. The bond between father and son. Then he dropped the footage. The surveillance. The threats. The letters. The face of the man who tried to buy his way into a legacy by dismantling ours. The judge's brow furrowed. The room changed. The energy shifted. Even Neely leaned forward slightly, not in concern, but calculation, like a man losing a chess piece and planning 4 moves ahead. Then the clinic's lead lawyer stood. And for the first time, he stumbled. We acknowledge a lapse, an overreach. Certain parties within the clinic acted independently, without sanction. I almost laughed. They were cutting ties, throwing Neely under the bus. Damage control. But it was too late. The judge looked up. I've heard enough. He turned to me. Mr. Sullivan, are you prepared to assume full legal custody of the minor in question? Yes, Your Honor. He turned to Sarah. Ms. Monroe, do you contest? She looked at me, then at Eli's drawing in her lap. 2 stick figures. One with a cape, one with a tie. She shook her head. No, I don't. The judge nodded. Bang of the gavel. Just like that, Eli was mine. Legally. Permanently. But victory didn't taste like champagne. It tasted like blood and grit and silence. Because I knew this wasn't over. Not really. That night, we went back to our apartment. No hotels. No fake names. Just home. Eli sat in the kitchen, legs swinging off the bar stool, drawing dinosaurs with a purple marker. Like none of it touched him. Like the war hadn't raged around his tiny, perfect life. And then, the doorbell rang. Late. Too late. I opened the door with one hand behind me, heart tight. But it wasn't Neely. It was a courier. He handed me a small black envelope. Inside, another flash drive. I didn't plug it in. Not yet. But there was a note. Typed. No signature. You won the boy. For now. But the system that made him, it doesn't lose. It adapts. He's not the first. He won't be the last. And next time, the father won't be around to stop it. I looked at Eli. He was laughing now, talking to his stuffed dinosaur like it had secrets. I walked over and pulled him close, held him tighter than I ever had before. Because they were right about one thing. He wasn't just my son. He was evidence. That love could grow from betrayal. That blood didn't define family, but choice did. And now? Now they had declared a new war. Not just on me, but on everything I stood for. And I was ready. It's been 16 months. Eli still calls me dad like he invented the word. We live in a quiet house now. One with creaky floorboards, a leaky faucet, and a backyard he swears is full of invisible dragons. There are no cameras, no courtrooms, no envelopes slid under doors. But some nights, I still check the windows twice. The flash drive is locked in a safe. I haven't watched it. I don't need to. I know what's on it. Or worse, what it means. That there are people out there trying to rewrite the rules of blood and belonging. Trying to manufacture families the way they build businesses. But they forgot something. You can't program love. You can't quantify loyalty. And you sure as hell can't control a father who's already walked through fire. Eli starts school next week. He picked out a backpack covered in planets. Said he's going to be an astronaut who fights dinosaurs in space. I told him that was the best job I'd ever heard. He grinned like he'd just solved the universe. And in that grin, I saw everything I almost lost. Not to illness. Not to law. To ambition. To greed dressed in a lab coat. They'll come back, I know. Different names. Different targets. A cleaner plan. But next time, I won't be surprised. I'll be ready. Because I'm not just a man anymore. I'm a shield. A name. A presence. A father. And no system, no boardroom, no blood test can take that from me. Ever again.